Hello creatives and makers. I'm Catherine Harris with Stitchery, and I do sewing and DIY tutorials each week. Well, almost each week. I have missed the last couple, but for good reason. My husband and I are new grandparents. That's right, we have our very first grandbaby, a cute little boy that was born unexpectedly early, so I had to take a little hiatus from YouTube for a little while. But I've come back with some ferocious baby sewing, and the first project on my list was to create a baby nest for our sweet little grandbaby. I have a sewing pattern, and I'll have the link to that in the description down below. So let's get on to that tutorial.
Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum.
So we're going to start with the mattress pad. So we are going to take our two pattern pieces, and I've chosen one as a printed quilted cotton and the other as a soft plush chenille that will be very nice against baby's skin. And note that these baby nests are reversible, so you can really play around with the fabric here. And I am just pinning along the outside edge. You're not going to want to do any of the bottom because you want to have an opening to place the wadding in. So I'm just pinning all along the edges here, making sure everything lines up nicely. And then I'm going to stitch all the way around, joining these two pieces together. And so I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine, and with the edge of my presser foot as my seam guide, I am just going to stitch the two together. And once they are all stitched together, I am going to clip the curves just so that everything lays nicely when we go to press it. This will really help when we add the bias binding on in the next step. So I'm flipping it right side out, and then I am taking my iron using a decent amount of steam to press open these seams. You want them nice and flat. I'm using a seam roll or a sleeve roll to get the inside edges where the curves are. It's a little bit easier to get the iron in there that way. And once that is all done, you can see that they are joined nicely and our bottom is nice and wide open. We can begin to create our bias tape. So you can use Twill Tape or pre-made bias tape, or if you want something that has a very unique pattern. This is a special baby gift that I am creating, so I wanted to make my own bias tape. I'm just using a bias tape maker and creating it. Now for the casing. Now we use that bias tape to create the casing for the baby nest, and we're going to pin it starting at the bottom, and we're going to pin on both sides, and we're just going to do this along the entire seam, having the seam between the two different types of fabric right in the middle. And then we're just going to stitch them all along, making sure as you're pinning you're not catching any of the other fabric. So once we have this all pinned in place, going all the way around, we can then take it over to our sewing machine and stitch that on. You're going to stitch one side, and then you're going to stitch the other side. And take it slow. Things tend to wad up and crinkle a bit, so you're going to be moving the fabric around. Next, we have optional handles. So with this, we are just going to take some of the bias tape we have just created, or if you use Twill Tape, by all means use the Twill Tape, and then I am going to place them right sides together, and then I'm putting a piece of Twill Tape in between because I want it to be a little bit more secure for those handles. Then I'm going to take a pin going through the Twill Tape and the first end of my fabric, and I'm just going to push the pin through so that we can pull it out right side on the other end. And then now I'm just pressing this nice and flat. And then you're going to take either end and you're going to push them in so that we have a nice end to the end cap here. So you're just folding them over so they're nice and neat. And then we're going to press them in place. You can do that to the other side as well. And this will create a handle that is perfect for you to use. Now, being careful not to carry baby with the handle. I'm not sure how secure that would be, but carrying around the baby nest, it makes it so much easier. So we're going to place these in place. I am just eyeballing them, though you could measure that if you want to get it exact. And just place that in the middle and making sure you're only going through the one edge. And you're going to want to choose which side to put them on. Now for the mattress pad, and we're going to do some quilting in here. So I've got my 505 spray adhesive, as well as 4 layers of cotton quilt batting. I'm just spraying the 505 spray adhesive on to hold these wadding pieces together so they don't shift while we're trying to do our quilting. And I'm just layering one on top of the other and smoothing out any of the wrinkles that may occur. And so once I have that all set and done, then we are going to put it inside our baby nest. Pro tip here, make sure you trace from what's on the pattern where that center part where the baby nest goes. I have attempted to do this where I didn't trace that on, and one side was a little larger than the other side when you're building up the walls of the nest. So really get in here and measure and make sure that it's in the center. Then you're going to want to stitch all the way around that wadding so that that wadding stays right in the middle, and you can stitch along the bottom as well. Next, I'm getting out my quilting ruler because I am going to mark my quilting lines. So I've decided to do my quilting lines 2 inches apart in a diamond diagonal pattern crisscrossing along here. Now you can get really creative with your quilting and do some fun designs, maybe use an echo foot. It's up to you on what you want to do. Bear in mind, we are going through 4 layers of batting plus 2 layers of fabric. So make sure you have a walking foot because the layers can get really thick in here. So here I'm just doing the cross hatching to my diamond pattern here, and I'm just using a chalk roller to place these markings on because they are easily dusted off, and I don't have to spray it with water if I'm using a water-soluble marker, which is just a bother. Next, we're going to feed the twill tape into the casing. So we want to do this before we actually stuff the sides in because it will be very difficult to get that through the casing if the sides are all stuffed. So this step just makes it a lot easier. So you're just going to take a safety pin and you're going to feed that twill tape all the way through to the ends here. And we're just going to put it so it comes all the way around. Next, we're going to stuff the side walls. So this is the fun part. So you're going to take your stuffing or your batting and you are going to place it all the way through. So I start on one side, go right to the middle and go through to the other side, making sure you're filling them about the same. And then what you are going to do next is you are going to clip the edges here. Just because we want to add in our bias tape. Now you could do the bias tape before you fill these side pieces. It's probably a bit easier if you're going to do it by machine. I decided to add my bias tape on by hand. So I fully stuffed and closed the ends ahead of time. It takes a little longer, but it looks a little nicer. But if you want things to go quickly, don't fill the ends, stuff them up, and then you can stitch it all on by hand and then just stitch the edges closed. I'm just showing you how I'm stitching my bias binding on the exact same way you would do any quilt that you are quilting. And I'm just doing an invisible stitch there. And now we get to create the sides. So you're going to pull that twill tape together to start to create the oval that is the nest. And then you're going to double knot it and tie it in place. Here I've done a bow, but later I went in and I actually clipped off the bow. I have an optional tie cover, and this hides the ends of those ties. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 pieces of our rectangular fabric, the size as described in the pattern, and we're going to stitch all the way around with an opening so that we can turn it. So you're going to flip it right side out after we've stitched them together. And then we're going to poke out the corners, making sure everything's nice and crisp. And then we're going to give it a nice good press with our steam iron, making sure that the edge on the bottom where the hole was is folded over nicely because we want to stitch that in place now. Once that's stitched, we are going to add on our snaps. And so you are just going to put the tops on and use your tool to smash them down, and then do the same on the bottom side. And what I like to do is I like to snap them back together so that I can really mark exactly where I want that next piece, so they all line up quite nicely. And then just add that second one in, and they come together like a dream. I actually got this kit off of Amazon for a reasonable price, and it included the tool to snap them together. And then once you have that on, you can place the optional tie cover on top of your baby nest. So you can see I've already clipped off those twill tapes. I just didn't want anything for baby to grab. And then you're just going to snap that in place to create your baby nest. And it is all done. And you could even create this as a reversible one using both pattern pieces for the fabrics. There you have it.
So now that you know how to make your own baby nest, you can go and create your own. Just make sure not to leave baby unattended in your baby nest. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, makers, let's get our sewspiration on.
Bum 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 ba dum ba dum.